Collins? Hey kid.
Dad's voice came out of nowhere, bringing me back to reality in the passenger seat of his dusty old pickup. The sun was setting through the trees as we careened down the winding road up to the cabin. The papers in my lap rustled, words scrawled messily all over the homework as he pushed them down into the floorboards.
The hell you bothering with that for?
Because I gotta get my grade up before the end of the year, I muttered back, trying to gather the papers off the dusty floorboard. If I don't have at least a B, then I won't qualify for a college grant.
Oh hell, this again? You don't need to go to college. You can work with me and your uncles, make plenty of money that way,
he said, his eyes starting to twitch. I recognized that twitch. He was already tweaking, and we weren't even 10 minutes out from the damn cabin. I don't think I was even mad or scared anymore, just tired of dealing with this bullshit every day, in and out. College couldn't come soon enough. I held my tongue, not wanting to piss him off more before we even get to the cabin. Once I was there, I could disappear for a bit into the woods and not have to deal with this crap. Just have to keep going. We drove on in silence, neither of us saying anything as I just looked at the papers in my lap. I was afraid to even write anything else in case he decided to just throw it out the window next time. Instead, we sat, saying nothing, waiting for the cabin to appear up ahead. Finally, it did. An old, run-down log cabin in the middle of the Georgia wilderness. Nothing special about it, not from the outside anyway. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen connected to the living room, and a creaky old porch with broken floorboards that you could fall through if you're not careful. You would think with all the money Dad and my uncles supposedly made, they would invest to keep the place from falling apart. But I knew they didn't think about that. No, any money they made went towards their own selfish wants and needs. I was still wearing clothes I got when I started middle school years ago, but Dad made sure he had cool new toys to play with and a brand new truck back at home that was only for driving around town. If half the people he flaunted that wealth to knew how he made his money, they would see him a lot differently. Uncle Ray and Uncle Pete were already here. It looks like Ray had brought Sutter with him too, his son who was a couple years older than me. Sutter was an alright guy, way nicer than any of the others in this family, but he wasn't the brightest. There was a woman standing outside the front porch smoking too, but I didn't recognize her.
The hell is that?
Dad grumbled, throwing the emergency brake on the truck without slowing down and almost making me go through the windshield. His only response was to laugh when I shouted in fear, desperately trying to keep all my papers and book together. The woman out front waved.
"Oh, you must be Petey's brother,"
she said as Dad got out, staring her up and down. She was. Well, she fit the stereotype that Uncle Peter liked. Bad tattoos running up and down her legs, crooked teeth, and hair that looked like it had been fried from thousands of cheap bleachings.
"I'm Delma, though I'm sure little Petey's already told you all about me."
She was cut off by Dad budging his way past into the cabin, shouting,
"Petey? Ray? Where are you? And who's this whore on my porch?"
I grabbed my bag, walking to the porch past Delma as she tried to put her cig out on the ground, stomping on it to smother the ashes. She looked at me, sizing me up as I walked. I just shrugged at her. "Sorry about him, he's a dick." She just smiled, demeanor changing as she started to laugh.
"Not the worst I've been called."
The cabin smelled like mildew and dust, giving me a headache almost the moment I walked in. It was going to be a long weekend.
"Hey Colin,"
Sutter shouted, coming up the stairs from the basement below with a smile on his face. I waved, not really feeling up to any interaction.
"Hey, I read that book you told me about, the one about the sky pirates. Damn, that was fun. I don't even like reading."
"Yeah, it had a pretty cool world, didn't it?" I replied, smiling back. It wasn't usual I had someone to talk to about books or the shows I watched, so it was pretty nice that Sutter was actually into some of the stuff I was. At least the weekend might not feel so lonely.
"Those books ain't gonna make you any money though,"
Dad grumbled, walking to the fridge and pulling out a beer before heading for the stairs, walking down while he opened the bottle.
"Pete, I told you only family at work."
"Sorry, brother." Pete's southern twang came from the basement, a tinge of fear in his voice as he realized Dad was there.
She's persistent." "Well, you two ain't getting a bedroom to yourselves, you know,"
Ray shouted from below, cracking himself up as Pete laughed too. Delma came in, shooing away mosquitoes as she closed the door behind her. "This place ain't got AC?" she asked, looking at Sutter and I. We both shook our heads, pointing to a box fan in the corner. "They got a window unit downstairs to filter that out, but nothing up here," I said. "They think I'm gonna sleep in that crank lab to stay cool? Jesus," she mumbled. Walking to the fridge, she opened the top freezer, nearly sticking her head in to cool off. "Ooh, Lord, how y'all put up with this heat? I feel ready to melt just standing up." "You get used to it after a while," Sutter said, turning back to me. "You gonna come work with us?" I think I'm gonna go for a walk actually. Don't tell Dad for me, please," I asked, begging with my eyes. If I have about a 10-minute head start, there's no chance Dad will come after me. Then I can just sneak back in after everyone's asleep tonight. "Grab some water and one of the sandwiches out of the fridge before you go. Don't want to be out there with nothing," he said, pointing over to where Delma was standing. She handed me 2 bottles of water and a sandwich before walking over to turn on the old television, grainy signal coming in over the old antenna. "Thanks, I'll see you later," I said, heading back out the door. I started running down the path to make sure I got out of sight before Dad might come back up, and eventually took off into the surrounding woods. After about 30 minutes of walking, I finally reached the spot. I had run off here so many times over the years I had lost count, but it was a little clearing in the middle of nowhere, a couple of trees for shade and a decent enough view of the path that I'll have advanced warning if Dad tries to find me. I settled in, putting my water aside and unwrapping the sandwich while I cracked open my book. Finally, peace away from the madness. It was nice, sitting out in the warm sun, getting lost in a book. Hell, even the sandwich was surprisingly good. Turkey, pepperoni, and provolone with Italian dressing. Sutter was a damn genius when it comes to making things taste good. Too bad his skills were being wasted on cooking shitty crank with a bunch of rednecks. Not long after I finished the sandwich, my eyes started getting heavy. Words blurred on the page, and I caught myself rereading the same sentence at least 3 times. I finally called it quits, sitting back against the tree in a spot where I was hidden from the path, and took a nap. The most awful sound woke me from my nap, like a train running through a mile of sheet metal at a top speed, screeching the entire time as it passed. I woke in fight or flight mode, ready to turn towards the cabin or even back towards the city that was miles away if I needed to. Where the sound came from, I had no idea, but it was seemingly everywhere, coming from all directions at once. Covering my ears did nothing to block out the awful noise, and my head began to ache as the vibrations nearly made my eyes shake. I swear I could feel it in my teeth. Then it stopped just as suddenly, and as I looked up, a bright blue light was beaming into the sky maybe a mile and a half away. My first thought was, for some reason, that Dad finally did something wrong and the lamp under the cabin blew up. Then I realized it probably wouldn't be making that color of light, and felt disappointment. Damn, I feel kind of bad, considering that Sutter and Delma didn't deserve to die that way, but holy shit, would it have been a relief if Dad did. Considering the sun was most of the way down, it was high time for me to get the hell back to the cabin anyway. Rustling around in my backpack, I found the lantern that I had brought just in case I stayed out too late. It wasn't anything expensive, but it lit up the surrounding area and had a decent enough battery life. I made sure to charge it before I left, so it should last me for the whole weekend if I'm smart about it. Time to start the journey back home. Of course I tripped on a tree root barely 10 minutes into the walk, nearly twisting my ankle. Not much I could do but shake it off, though my foot was screaming at me now. God, I just wanted to get to the couch so I can fall back asleep and try to be out again before sunrise. Hopefully Dad isn't still awake. My thoughts were interrupted by a noise somewhere ahead of me. To my right, I think. God, it's already so dark, and my watch only reads 8 p.m. I'm gonna have to be careful and keep my bearings about me. Holding the lantern up, I try to get a better look at what may be ahead, wary in case I ran into a bobcat or something else that may be lurking. A million volts shot right up my spine, stopping me in my tracks. The lantern light was reflecting off 2 massive white orbs in the darkness between 2 trees straight ahead of me. I could barely make out a silhouette, maybe 5 feet tall. A lithe, wiry body with long legs and arms, and the head at least twice the size as a normal human. Everything in me was going off, survival instinct telling me I should get the hell out of these woods. For a moment, we stood there, and I swear we made eye contact. It was watching me. I was watching it. Both of us just waiting for the other to make the first move. Except I felt like if I was the first to move, it was going to pounce on me. Right now, I felt like I was just being observed. But at a moment's notice, something told me that this thing could pull me apart by barely lifting a finger. A whistle pierced the air around us, shrill, almost hurting my ears, but it broke the attention of the thing staring me down. It turned, suddenly bounding off into the distance, gone before I could get a better look at it. Didn't realize I was holding my breath until it all came rushing out right there. Fresh gulps of oxygen flooding my lungs and making my head spin. What the fuck? I whispered to myself, wondering out loud if what I saw was something natural or some undiscovered cryptid nobody's heard of. At this point, I'll take running into the bobcat. I didn't stop to think about it for too long. Nope, just going to run my ass back to the cabin as fast as possible. Even if Dad was there waiting for me, a beating from him would honestly be way less terrifying than whatever the hell that was just now. The skies above were extra dark tonight. Not a single star or even the moon to light my way. As clouds covered everything, it just made the feeling more eerie as I walked back, and every little rustle or twig breaking in the woods around me made me nearly jump out of my damn skin. Finally, I made it back. The porch light was off, surprisingly, but the light in the main room was on, and I could hear shouting from inside. I didn't even try to be subtle. At this point, the nagging fear in the back of my mind was screaming at me to get the hell inside, where it was safe. Granted, it wasn't safe anyway, but at least there wasn't that thing in there.
The hell you been, boy?
Dad shouted almost the nanosecond I was through the door. Wincing, I closed it fast behind me, looking out the nearby window to see if any kind of creature had followed me all the way back. Maybe I was being paranoid at this point. Whatever it was shook me to my damn core. Fell asleep, sorry, I muttered, still looking outside for a moment before pulling the curtains down. Maybe it was a one-time run-in, but just in case. I swear I could feel those big white eyes still glaring at me from the darkness. Whatever was out there wasn't just going to leave us alone that easily.
Fell asleep? Asleep?
He was screaming at me now. I could see the others behind him as he got up from the ready couch, storming towards me with fury in his eyes.
Come on, Danny, let the kid be a kid,
Ray mumbled, trying to come to my aid, but barely making a difference as my dad swung a hand. It stung, hitting me right on the cheek. Not the worst hit he had ever given me, but shit, it still hurt enough to make me wince. Dad turned to his brother almost immediately after landing the blow, raising his fist to him now.
Don't you dare tell me how to parent my kid,
he said, smacking him in the back of the head. Ray didn't say anything after that, just a brief grumble of "sorry," before sitting back and sipping his drink.
There's something out there,
I said, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. Dad must have taken it as back talk though, because he raised a hand again, ready to smack the shit out of me another time, before I spoke up even louder.
No, there's something out there. Something followed me in the woods.
The police? Pete asked, sitting up and moving towards the front window to peer out now.
No, it wasn't a person. At least, I don't think it was,
I muttered back. Dad stared at me for a moment, sizing me up like he was deciding if I was telling the truth, or just trying to fuck with him. At this point, you would think he would know better, but he was always looking for another excuse to beat my ass, so I'm not surprised. Something hit the front door hard, making it shake in the frame. If they were doubting me, it almost immediately disappeared. The others practically jumped off the couch, and Dad was hitting for the shotgun in the corner within moments.
Fuck was that?
Pete asked, moving closer to the window, standing as close to the edge of the window pane as he could. He moved the curtains with a fingertip, trying to see what could be out there in the dark. Dad was already at the entryway now, cocking the shotgun and getting ready to heft it to his shoulder. He practically kicked the wooden door down before storming out onto the porch, holding the shotgun up and at the ready. Pete walked up behind, flipping the front light on so we could see a little further into the darkness, but the dingy yellow glow barely made a dent in the inky darkness beyond. Hell, the tree line was barely visible. Another thump caught our attention. As Dad stood on the step just at the edge of the porch, Pete and I stared from the doorway. Delma, Sutter, and Ray all gathered near the windows, trying to catch a glimpse of what might be beyond our flickering porch light. There, standing right on top of Dad's truck, was the same figure I'd seen in the woods not even an hour ago. No, wait. This one was taller. It took me a second with the light to realize this thing was towering over the truck, standing right beside it with glowing white eyes, reflecting the dim light that barely reached it. It had to be maybe 9 feet tall, or twice what the other one was in the woods. Maybe this one was. Maybe it was full grown, or maybe they just came in different shapes and sizes. Dad noticed it and fired off a shot, illuminating the darkness for a brief moment. In it, I got the clearest look at the creature yet for just a second. It was tall, that's for sure. The height was so oddly proportioned though, that it looked like some caricature art of a person you'd see in a newspaper cartoon. The legs took over half of its length, stretching almost to the top of the truck before its torso finally began. The torso itself looked like a malnourished child, almost frail. Bones could be seen jutting through tight, leathery skin. But they didn't look like any anatomy I had ever seen. All crisscrossed across it with no semblance of symmetry. Arms long enough to reach its knees without bending ended in huge clawed fingers that looked like they could tear flesh apart in an instant. The face though, God, the face. Skin was a deep, mottled gray that looked like dead flesh and fading bruises. It had a mouth, but it was like it had been turned 180 in the center, going straight up the middle of its face between the huge white eyes. The eyes, well, they were almost filmed over. And if it was human, I would assume it had awful cataracts. Practically blind is what it should have been. But instead, I could feel those eyes boring into me, watching as it stared us all down from the other side of the truck. It was gone again in an instant as the flash of the gun faded away. Dad fired another shot, and I could hear it roar, a metallic screech that sounded like cars colliding at hundreds of miles per hour. It made my head hurt, like my ears were going to bleed just listening to it. But suddenly, it was over just as soon as it began. "Get inside," Dad said, motioning me back through the doorway. "Get inside." I don't think I've ever seen genuine fear in this man's eyes. But here we are. He moved faster than I've ever seen to, running through the door right as the creature out there roared again. This time though, it sent a message that was even louder. Dad's truck was thrown, going at least 15 feet in the air without so much as a warning that it was leaving the ground. As he slammed the door shut behind us, I could see the headlights come on, alarm already blaring from the first impact as it fell on top of Pete's car, crushing it with a loud crunch. Dad stood against the door, holding the shotgun to his chest and staring straight ahead. If I wasn't so fucking terrified by what we all just witnessed, I would be taking in his reaction with glee, considering all he's put me through over the years. I couldn't though, because right now, I don't know if we're going to live to see the sunrise. "The hell just happened to my car?" Pete asked, swallowing so hard the thing outside probably heard it. He rushed around, pulling the curtains and blinds closed on all the windows, like he was afraid they would see us freaking out. If one of them wanted to come in, a curtain certainly wasn't going to keep it from us. "The hell just throws a truck like that, Daniel?" "I don't know what the hell that was, Pete." Dad shot back, letting out a long sigh finally. The gun was shaking in his hands, practically vibrating from fear. It wasn't alone either. "Petey, I'm scared. I want to go home," Delma was whispering as she grabbed onto Petey's arm, gripping so tight one of her nails began to draw blood. He pulled away, wincing as her vice grip wouldn't let him for a moment. "Well, car is done for, so we're kinda fucked up there, babe," he answered back. He was standing by the edge of the window, trying to get any kind of courage he could to look outside and see if there was any way out. The lights from both cars were flashing. Shrill alarms coming from Pete's and Dad's cars honked half-heartedly as the headlights flashed through the window, sending a sliver of light through the crack in the curtain and into the living room. Through it, I could see Ray and Sutter sitting nearby, both frozen in fear. "Ain't nobody leaving with those things out there," Dad grumbled. "That one was big, but there were others in the trees. I could see them for a second when the shot lit everything up. Might be half that thing's size, but probably just as deadly." "So what the hell do we do?" Sutter asked, so low it was hard to hear him. "We could try to run to my car," Ray offered, digging his keys out of a pocket. Might be able to get away. All of us won't fit, I muttered. For being a redneck crank brewer, Ray drove the most unstereotypical car possible. A fucking Prius. Getting 2 of us in the damn thing was going to be asking a lot. But all 6? Those things will be all over us before we can get the doors open. We just have to last until sunrise, and then get the hell out of here. You think they won't try to come in here? Delma asked, her voice nearly a squeak. We could hide in the basement, I offered. That's it, shaking his head before I could even finish the thought. Too many fumes in there right now, unless you're sleeping with a mask on, and we only have 4 of those. Oh good, so we either die from the things in the trees or meth fumes. Great, I retorted, muttering more to myself than anything. To my surprise, Dad didn't even try to get onto me for it. Instead, he just shook his head again, clutching the shotgun tighter. Pete, Ray, pull the beds out of the rooms. We're gonna barricade the doors and windows. Use any of the furniture you can. He started barking off orders instead, determined to take control after briefly showing weakness. What are we gonna sleep on? Pete inquired. Not like any of us were going to be able to sleep, knowing what was just beyond the thin walls of the cabin. Dad only shot him a glare, and he shut up almost immediately, moving off to bring furniture into the room alongside Ray. It took about 30 minutes, but they managed to cover both the door and the front windows with bed frames, mattresses, and a dresser from one of the bedrooms. We locked the bedroom doors and all set up camps in the middle of the living room, ready for a restless night, wondering if they could come after us at any moment. We kept the lights on, none of us daring to turn them out for fear that something would show up in the dark. I tried to read for a while, hoping to take my mind off the nightmare just outside our walls, but my eyes couldn't focus on any words on the page. Every slight rustle or gust of wind outside made me think this was it. They were going to burst through the barricade and eviscerate us all where we lay. Dad was sitting up in one of the chairs, facing the door with a shotgun at the ready. But what was the gun going to do at this point? At some point, I don't know when, I fell asleep. Despite the lights being on, I had the lantern right beside me, ready in case of any sudden need to run out into the darkness and away from here. Sleep had other plans though. It came on suddenly, trying to read one moment when my eyelids suddenly began to dip, huge weights pulling them closed even as fear tried to tell me not to let it happen. I awoke to screaming. The lights had gone out. Everything was dark. I guess the headlights on the cars finally gave up because nothing was coming through the window. Delma was screaming bloody murder though, and it took me a moment in my half-asleep state to figure out what she was saying. They're here! I reached for the lantern at my side, flipping the switch on and getting a full view of the horror unfolding in our little cabin. 3 of the smaller creatures were standing over Pete, one with a hand deep inside my uncle's chest. There was blood all over the floor around him, and though it seemed like he was trying to scream, I don't think his lungs were working as they should. The creature standing above him was looking right at the act as it happened. Big white eyes, wide with intrigue. It's like they were examining him. It was feeling around inside his chest cavity, getting a feel for how our insides worked. The sideways mouth in the middle of its face was practically smiling with the glee of discovery. Let go of him, Delma shouts, jumping towards one of the creatures and slapping it hard. It didn't even move, only looking at her and letting out one of the terrifying metallic roars just like the big one. My head hurt again, ears fizzling as the sound threatened to break my eardrum from this close. The thing flicked a finger in Delma's direction, sending her flying through one of the bedroom doors as it broke from the force of her moving body. She barely let out a grunt before crumpling a couple of feet inside the doorway. Leave my brother alone, Dad screamed, raising the shotgun and firing off round after round, furiously pumping between each one before the gun began to click empty. The things weren't phased, only looking at him before raising a hand in his direction. The gun flew from his hands as if something invisible snatched it right away, throwing it across the room. The one with a hand inside Pete began to withdraw, now looking at Dad with great interest as it moved closer. He shouted, pulling a knife and brandishing it at them as they moved with determination, each one approaching him from a different direction, flanking their prey. I can't even begin to describe the whirlwind that was happening around me. Ray and Sutter both awoke, but were stuck gawking at the sight in front of us, just like I was. The creatures began to grab for Dad, the three of us unable to do anything as the two of them grabbed his arms, one each, while the third grabbed him right around the ankles. They began to walk out, and I noticed our formerly cluttered barricade was stacked off to the side of the room, somehow moved without a sound as we were all sleeping. They carried my father out the door without so much as a sound other than his desperate screaming. He was cursing at them, throwing every insult imaginable as they took him into the darkness, away from the shattered safety of the cabin. As they disappeared into the night, his screaming began to steadily fade. "What the hell do we do now?" Sutter whispered, though I don't know if he wanted an actual answer or not. "Whatever we do now, we're not safe anywhere in these fucking woods." I got up, closing the door and looking back at the two of them in the lantern light. Ray looked like a shell-shocked soldier from those old World War II photos. Sutter was just whispering to himself, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. Pete, whatever they did to Pete, got him out of this mess. And honestly, I think he's lucky that he's got out this early. The blood around him was beginning to pool, and his chest was no longer rising or falling in sporadic rhythm. As he stared lifeless at the ceiling, I reached over, closing his eyes, and bowed my head before making my way to the bedroom. Thelma was still alive, though unconscious. There's no telling how many broken bones she has though. Her arm was twisted in a bad direction, and her breathing was ragged, pained, likely thanks to a few broken ribs. I could only hope she didn't have a punctured lung. Her head was bleeding slightly, I'm assuming from where she hit the door on her express flight into the bedroom, and I reached for one of the nearby blankets to try and hold to her head. "We need to run," I said. "How the hell are we gonna do that?" Ray asked, sounding like he had already given up. "Well, there's enough of us that will fit in your car now," I shot back. "You mean we're just gonna leave without Danny?" he asked me, now a little more present than before. "I can't leave my big brother behind." "Fuck him, we still have a chance to live," I said, anger welling up in my throat. Not like he would give a second fucking thought about going after one of us if we were taken. "He's got a point," Sutter mumbled, and his dad didn't even try to argue it back. "Where are the masks downstairs?" I asked, trying to turn lights on, but getting no response from flipping switches. Must be something wrong with the fuse box. "Hanging up at the bottom of the stairway," Ray said. "I guess we could hide down there. The fumes are probably still bad though." "Good. There's propane tanks down there, right?" I was trying to put everything together in my mind. "We could set a trap for these things and still get everyone alive out of here at the same time if my plan goes right. Or I could end up torching us all to cinders in the process. Either way, we don't stand a chance in here or out there, so might as well go down swinging, right?" "Gotta be honest, Pa. Colin is right," Sutter said now, standing up and looking at me for guidance. "There's about 4 small tanks and 1 big one right next to the cellar door. What's the plan?" "Where's your car keys?" I started laying everything out for them as I dared to peek outside. Through the window, the moon was shining bright over the little clearing the cabin was in now. It took my eyes a moment to adjust after being in the lantern light for so long. But after a moment, the horror of our situation was completely visible. At least a dozen pairs of milky white eyes were staring at us from the tree line. I couldn't see the rest of them, but they were there. Judging by the height the eyes were at, we were dealing with a bunch of the smaller ones, with no telling where the massive beast from earlier could be. Maybe it had enough for the night after flipping the truck. I could only hope. Ray pulled some jingling keys from his pocket, getting ready to toss them at me before I shook my head. "You're driving. I'm going to lure them in here while you and Sutter get Thelma in the car," I said, turning back to them and away from the window. "Don't know how much time I'm going to be able to buy, so be as fast as you can, okay?" They both nodded, each moving to either end of Thelma to grab her legs and arms. After they heft her up, I motioned for them to wait for another minute. Moving to the back door, cranking it open just slightly to get a look outside, I poked my head out. It's clear back here. Maybe they didn't think we would go out this way since the cars were out front. Whatever the reason, this was going to be the best way for them to get around. "Okay, you guys go out this way and go around to get her in the car. I'm going to lead them into the basement and blow it once I get most of them inside, I said, turning back to them.
How are you gonna get out though?
Sutter about shouted. He thought I was going to try for the sacrifice play, I think. But there's no way in hell I was dying in a fucking math cabin. Just trust me, pull the car around to the cellar door and I'll meet you there, I said. Shit, there was still something missing. I hefted the lantern, looking all around the room before my eyes finally landed on it. The shotgun. It was dropped on the floor, where one of the things ended up throwing it from Dad's hands, sitting empty with no more shells. Should be around here somewhere. Rooting around in the kitchen cabinets for a minute turned up half a box of them. I had a little experience shooting from just being out here with Dad as a kid. He would set up old beer bottles and fire them off on the last day of each trip, and inevitably ended up having me shoot at some too while we were at it, usually while going on a tirade about my mother or whoever he had just ended a recent relationship with. Great environment to grow up in, right? Whatever though, I have what I need. Now it's time to get going. I pushed the others out the back door and closed it so the things wouldn't go that way when they came in. Quickly, I ran down the basement stairs, grabbing the mask off the pack by the last step and situating it over my face. It was one of those with a whole face shield on it, so everything fucked up for a moment as I adjusted to the dim light down here. Hefting the lantern, I looked around and got a feel for the way I would need to go. The path through the lab was straight through, with counters set up along either wall of the cellar filled with tubes, trays, beakers, and burners that all kept Dad paid before tonight. Now it was going to get a little revenge on the fuckers that took him. One by one, I found the propane tanks, popping off the rubber hoses that led them to burners and twisting the valves wide open. I could hear the slight hiss as gas began leaking into the air, filling the cellar with deadly fumes. It's time. Walking back upstairs, over to the front door, I took a deep breath, cocking the shotgun and saying a brief prayer to whoever might be listening before flinging it open. They just watched me, filmy eyes studying me in the doorway. As they slowly began to creep forward from the shadowy woods, my stomach sank. Jesus, this is basically suicide. These things carried my dad away like it was nothing, and now they were coming back to rip me to shreds right here on the front porch. No time to think about that now though. Got to get moving or else they really will tear me to pieces. Have to at least try to make a difference here. I'm not going to die being pathetic. They were all out in the sunlight now. It was uncanny how they all looked exactly the same. Leathery skin, asymmetrical bones jutting through it like canvas stretched over some horrific sculpture. Those wide eyes that looked totally blind, but somehow saw every little move. I could feel them staring me down, waiting for the sign to all strike at once and rip me apart, limb from limb. That would probably be lucky. Worst case, they start poking around in me like they did to Uncle Pete. His corpse was still resting right there in the living room behind me, a stark reminder of what could be my fate.
Come on, fuckers!
I shouted, firing off a shot at the closest one. It didn't even wince, if that was something they could do. Instead, they all let out that metallic roar at the same time again, making me shut my eyes briefly and grit my teeth. Felt like my skull was going to shatter into pieces from the frequency, and it took everything in me not to just run off into the woods, hoping for safety in the trees. When my eyes came back open, they were rushing the porch, each one clambering up the steps and pushing over each other to get to me. I stepped back, pivoting to turn towards the basement door. A few big strides and I made it, looking back to see all of the creatures clambering past each other to try and fit through the door. For a second, I wanted to laugh at the sight. All of these terrifying things trying to come through the same narrow doorway, pushing each other and desperately trying to rush past before finally all getting stuck. The humor was quickly killed when the first one fell through onto the ground, quickly standing without a struggle. It was like it floated to its feet right off the ground, ready to come after me again, and it started moving fast. Taking the steps 2 at a time, I adjusted my mask. Have to go fast. Fast. My breathing picked up, fogging up the visor on the mask more and obscuring my vision. Behind me, one of the lead creatures stumbled down the last couple of steps, letting out another roar that almost made me trip in return from the ear-piercing pain. More followed it, all joining in the chaos and squalor with their own screams. I hit the ladder leading through the cellar door, hearing it creak and fearing I would fall right through, before clambering up and bursting through out into the open. From my new vantage above the cellar door, out in the open moonlight, I could see them starting to scramble at the rickety ladder below me. I have the shotgun, taking aim at the first one, right at one of the milky white eyes, and squeezing the trigger. The shot hit, blowing away a chunk of the thing's eye as it screamed even louder in pain. This was worse than the roar, I think, so much more shrill, hundreds of different frequencies activating at once. God, my brain is going to pop if it doesn't stop. Squinting hard and gritting my teeth with enough pressure to break them off at the root, I raised the gun again, taking steady aim, or at least trying to, as all my senses felt like they were bleeding and breaking down. I got it though, squeezing the trigger one more time and blasting it in the same exact spot I already hit. Guess the eyes were softer than the rest of the skeleton, because some of the pieces of buckshot tore right through it, spilling out neon blue fluid and causing the thing to fall to the ground, twitching. Before I could celebrate my victory though, more of them began to swarm, grabbing the ladder to try and climb up to me. They were different now though. Before it was, well, they were definitely running at me with a goal in mind, determined, calculating, I would dare say calm. Now that one of their own was fucked though, they were angry. The eyes were changing, going from milky white to a deep indigo hue. Their mouths were wide open in screams of rage and mourning, sharp pins inside showing as their long clawed hands reached towards me. I fired again, but this time not at the creatures. A bottle of whiskey Dad had left on the shelf by the ladder, only half drank. Somehow, despite years of being the shittiest human on earth, he managed to save me just this once. Not that he planned, or would ever know about it, but goddamn. For a second, I felt grateful for the old bastard. The shot was right on the money, blasting apart the glass bottle and splashing whiskey all over the place. It landed mostly on the monsters, dousing them for a brief moment, before the rest of the pellets hit the metal shelf, causing a spark that lit them all up. Of course, that wasn't their only problem. The propane leaking out into the room was already thick and caught almost immediately. The heat from the sudden explosion knocked me back from the cabin and what remained of it at this point, nearly knocking me out cold. Ray and Sutter had just begun to drive the car around, and as their headlights came around the corner, I could have sworn it was the light of heaven opening up to take me. I half expected to hear a voice telling me to go into the light, but before I could do anything else, I felt rough hands hauling me to my feet. Looking over through the now fogged and soot-covered mask, I could see Sutter carrying me to the car, opening up the back driver's side and tossing me in right beside a still unconscious Thelma. As soon as I was in, he slammed the door shut, jumping into the passenger side before Ray floored it towards the dusty dirt road. I laid back in the seat, letting out a huge sigh of relief. I didn't know how that actually worked, but we made it out somehow. Dad and Pete were dead, but, well, I'm honestly too relieved to be alive to dwell on mourning them at this point. Don't really think I'll be mourning Dad anyway when it comes down to it. As we drove, I looked off behind us, moon hanging low in the dark, starless sky above the car as we went. The flames from the cabin were enough to appear on the horizon, even over the tall trees that lined the road on each side. To my surprise though, something else was glowing in the sky. A loud mechanical hum began to vibrate the car as we fled the scene, and I'm not sure if it was just us shaking or everything around. But slowly, a huge purple glow began to rise above the treetops, faintly pulsing in the night as it hovered before going over the flames, unleashing a massive beam of light over it. "The hell is that?" Sutter whispered, staring at it along with me. Ray began to slow down, too distracted by the happenings in his rear view to focus on not running us through a tree. "Fucking aliens," Ray whispered. The huge beam of light was beginning to attract something from where it was shining on the burning cabin. Limp, long-limbed bodies floating up through the air in the beam. The remains of some floated beside them, no longer attached thanks to the force of the explosion. Over the night air, even through the humming of the craft's engine, I could hear the roar of rage coming from the creatures. "Just fucking drive, Ray," I shouted, finally ripping the mask off my face to get a more clear look and breathe fresh air. The purple glow was blindingly bright, and suddenly, the beam of light shining on the cabin faded, leaving just the dull, pulsing purple to hang in the sky. Then, suddenly, not even in the blink of an eye, it zoomed off, straight up into the sky until it was out of sight. Just a speck of purple in the moonlight. I collapsed in the backseat, aches and pains already flaring up from the beating I took in the explosion, probably some broken ribs. But all told, that was better than whatever those things would have done to me. We drove on in silence, only the occasional pained grumble from Delma breaking the still air. I don't know where I'm going to go, or what I'm going to do. Dad is dead, and I doubt he left me anything or had any kind of will. Maybe I can move in with Ray and Sutter. But, God no, that's a terrible idea. Well, whatever the uncertain future holds, at least my days at the cabin are finally over. Maybe I can actually go to college without hearing about how awful it would be now too. Honestly, this might not be so bad.